did any returning players stand out as in terms of bulking up, leadership, or anything else?
We saw a picture of Marvin Harrison on social media today where it looks like he's bulked up. I mean, not quite to David Boston with the Chargers type of bulked up, but I mean, he certainly looks like he's filled out. All those receivers look like they've filled out a good amount. When it comes to leadership, Ryan Day got into this leadership council type of situation, which was a lot to follow. But I think the big thing is that they understand that so much of this goes with leadership, and maybe last year there were some breakdowns in terms of some of your on-field leadership or what have you. So they've really put a huge onus on leadership this year in terms of the offseason. And while they didn't get into super specifics of it, claiming it as an internal thing, I would certainly expect to see I expect improvement.
Excuse me. The first part of the question about guys who've maybe changed their bodies a little bit, we talked about Mitchell Melton. He's put the time that he had away because of injury, it seems, to good work. And let me see here if I can find him. He is up to 245 pounds. So that is a really good job by him. Three guys that Coach Day talked about who really distinguished themselves in the winter program, the 7 weeks from when they picked up after the Rose Bowl till last week. One of them was Cameron Babb, who is trying to come back, obviously 2 years now of knee problems. And they are hoping that he can get on the field as a wide receiver this year. He is he was a team captain last year. He's listed 6 foot, 205 pounds. He might be a super senior. I'm not sure. He's a fifth-year senior, I think. So he's in that mix. And a couple of the young DBs, Jordan Hancock, cornerback, he got to play a little bit last year. He's a sophomore this year. And Ja'Kalen Johnson, the other one, he's a redshirt freshman. Those two guys were both outstanding, it sounds like, in the winter program. He mentioned that Cade Stover was an Iron Buckeye, just one of many. I assume there were, 2 dozen of those who really distinguished themselves in the winter program. So that was the thing. Coach Day talked about how they had 24 players step up to declare themselves that they wanted to have a leadership role. And I think it wasn't that there was a negative vibe or, a lack of leadership or anything like that. I think what you had last year was a lack of experience for so many guys who were taking over and seeing their first time playing on the field for the first time. It was hard for those guys to assume leadership roles. Well, now you have as many as, I think it's 14 returning starters, 6 on both sides of the ball. And you've got a bunch of guys now who can say, yes, I've been there. I want to be a leader. I can be a leader for this team. And, you get into a tough situation like a Michigan game or potentially a game at Penn State or something like that along the lines this year. And, those guys can step up and be the guys that lead this team to victory. So I think that was what Coach Day was alluding to is more leaders, better leaders, some leaders. I think that was probably, when your quarterback is a redshirt freshman and, it took the first half of the season for him to just worry about what he was doing before he became the leader of the offense. So, I think now he is a guy that everyone's looking to that, you're going to lead us to the promised land, partner. And so he's going to be, it wouldn't surprise me if he's a team captain and a sophomore and what figures to be his last year at Ohio State, third-year sophomore. So, just a lot of dynamics with this team. But I think between those two areas, guys who improved their physical attributes through the winter program and guys who have said, count on me, I will try and be a leader. And, it was very interesting. He talked about how they took those 24 guys, divided them into 12 two-man units, and then basically drafted the rest of the team around them. And I would envision you probably had one guy on offense and one guy on defense. in each of those units to lead them, and then just, you're here and you're here and this is that. And they said that if somebody stepped out of line, was late for a practice, then everybody in that group had to do community service the following weekend. So it bred accountability, I think, for the entire group, and that can only be a thing. One of the things I noticed, Kevin, you'll know this, that when we show up, they do calisthenics for about 15 minutes, stretching, jogging in place, leaning against the next guy and swinging your leg and, stretching your Achilles and all this other stuff, and your hamstrings and your groin muscles and all that stuff, and getting ready, for a physical football practice. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to stretch. Well, they used to have one row of quarterbacks, a couple rows of running backs, a couple rows of wide receivers, a row of tight ends, 2 or 3 rows of offensive linemen, then 2 or 3 rows of defensive linemen, 2 or 3 rows of linebackers, 2 rows of cornerbacks, 2 rows of safeties, and the specialists. They're not doing it that way anymore. You had, the offense wears scarlet, the defense wears white. You had a row of red, then you had a row of white, then you had a row of red, and you had a row of white. And when you're leaning on somebody, it was a red guy leaning on a white guy. And to me, that breeds that full team camaraderie, as opposed to we are just sequestered with the guys from our room. You do plenty of that throughout the rest of practice. I mean, when they're doing position drills, the linebackers are in one area, the defensive linemen are in another area. At least during the stretching, they are integrated. So I think that creates more of a situation where you have offense and defense together as one unit.
Yeah, and it makes it more difficult to take photos because you knew, okay, I can just focus right here and get quarterbacks, or I can focus right here and get safeties or whatnot. But I think it is a good change to have. Something you really couldn't have installed during the COVID times, though, because even, at least in terms of appearances, you wanted to try and keep groups kind of sequestered or whatnot, so you wouldn't just sit there and Lord knows what you would end up losing if you had contact tracing or whatever. But I don't even want to think about any of that crap anymore. It sure looks good for pictures on the wide shot, but now you're going to have to hunt a little bit more for your favorite player to get that ISO.